Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CASTcast. This is the podcast for the Association for Software Testing, and specifically for the conference for the Association for Software Testing 2017, which will be happening in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Michael Larson.
And I'm Claire Moss.
And today we are happy to welcome Erik Davis.
Hello. How you doing, Michael and Claire?
We're doing very good. Thanks for joining us on, at least for what is for me, a rather early morning. I know that for East Coast time, this is not that early, but for those of us on the West Coast, it's still very dark outside, which is only compounded by the fact that I'm literally inside of my desk with blankets surrounding the cage. I feel like I'm inside of my blanket fort this morning. So, hey, good morning to you all.
I wish I had a blanket fort for recording. This is going on my to-do list.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about specifically with CAST, and specifically with any conference that we might be able to attend, is, let's face it, unless it happens to be in the city you live in or it's a very low-cost affair, conferences cost money. Conferences can be expensive. Very commonly, the refrain that we hear is, oh, I would love to be able to go to fill-in-the-blank conference, but I just can't. I just can't afford it, or my company is not going to pay for this. One of the things that I remember from a couple of years back, Erik was able to get a rather large contingent of his own company to come to CAST and had a very creative way of doing it. So that's part of the reason why we asked Erik onto the show today, was to talk a bit about creative ways in which you can get your team to conferences and get the most bang for your buck. Erik, tell us a little bit about your background and how this topic is relevant to you.
I've been in software testing, testing adjacent for a little over 17 years now. It's the only thing I've done professionally since being out of college. I really like it a lot, which is why I keep trying to do it. I first learned about the CAST conference in 2012. A good friend who had been poking me for multiple years saying, you need to go to this thing, you need to look into this. I think it's really going to help you. So I ended up going to CAST, was the only person, no, actually there were two of us that went from my company back at that point. I'd not really known anything about it. I'd not really been involved with AST in any meaningful way. I kind of knew it existed, but that was it. And it was a pivot point for me in my career because it was the first time I really stepped outside of the bounds of the bubble that was the company I worked at and engaged with names that I knew that were intelligent testing people out in the real world, and started learning from people that worked elsewhere that had other new ideas that we hadn't encountered where I was working. I was able to continue going for a number of years after that by being initially convinced to submit a talk, even though I didn't really have a talk ready, and luckily getting accepted to speak.
Classic.
That was I had some good friends who were like, you should submit. They probably won't pick your talk. And then I got accepted, and then I had to make my first conference talk. So that was my way of getting myself in, sort of on the cheap for my company. It's like, hey, look, the conference is free. Can you cover a hotel room? After that, I was looking for ways to get more people from my team and from other teams at the company I worked for in. The easiest one for me was, okay, well, you should all submit a talk. You're not all going to get accepted, but hey, if you get accepted, it's going to be easier because then it's just, hey, company, can you cover a hotel room and maybe some travel? The one benefit for me that I found with CAST specifically is that CAST travels a lot. So every year it's in a completely different place. It's not like one of the East or West conferences where it's always going to be on a coast. And if you happen to live in the middle of the country, you're always going to be trying to get to that coast, even if it's not always in the same venue. CAST travels around so much. And being in Northeast Ohio, when it happened to come to Grand Rapids, Michigan, I realized that would be a really good opportunity for me to get a bunch of people out there. I worked through the department, found a number of people who were very interested in going. Our budgeting was kind of loose at the time, but I still wasn't able to just do whatever I wanted. We got a group that was interested in going and ended up getting a couple of rental cars and combining as many people as we could get in rooms as possible to keep the cost down on the company. We had a couple of people who were speaking at the time, so that helped reduce the cost. And we were able to get, I think that year I had 8 or 9 people attend, I believe, 3 of them being my entire team at the time. And then a number of other people. I had someone from our internal QA training group, as well as a number of testers that were able to attend because we were able to pare the cost down enough to a point where, the company said, yeah, okay, we'll cover that because we didn't fly. We all drove. It was a perfectly fine drive. It was, like 5.5 hours, which really wasn't that big of a deal. But that really helped us get the cost down for the group and get everybody out there to experience the conference, most of them for the first time.
So Erik's experience is actually a bit similar to mine. I didn't know whether I wanted to be a speaker, but I happened to go to a session by Lisa Crispin, and she'd mentioned that she hadn't had a big budget to go to conferences. So then she started submitting as a speaker and was accepted and was able to go without having to pay a conference fee. And I thought, that's brilliant. I'd love to try that. Not because I want to be a public figure, but because I would like to be able to go to conferences and my budget is small.
Mm-hmm.
So when, Erik, did you say 2012 was your first cast?
Yes, the one I met
Same
you.
for me. So I submitted to an emerging topic to CAST 2012 and was accepted. So my company was willing to sponsor my travel because I had been accepted to speak at the conference. So I think that is a shared experience of several different speakers.
Nice. Yeah.
That's the same for me. 2011, the cast that was in Seattle was my first cast, and it was a similar deal. I was able to go because they had the emerging topics theme, and I submitted on emerging topics. And I also had the other benefit in that both James and John had asked me if I would be willing to run a actual workshop at the conference, and where we actually ran a weekend testing event on premises. So yes, the key thing here is that very often just submitting to speak is a good opportunity for you to participate. However, as is very frequently the case, there's X number of slots for speakers, and there are X number of participants that are able to speak. So there's no guarantee that just saying, oh, I'll just submit a talk and therefore I'll be able to go to the conference for free. Your talk has to be picked. And
sure.
Even when it comes to some of us people who I guess would be now considered veterans, we don't always necessarily get our talks picked. I will freely say this give and go around, the talk that I proposed was not chosen, and that's totally okay.
As a conference organizer, I totally understand that, because one of the things that I promote is new voices. So I think that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
To have people who's never spoken, people who are veteran speakers. You really want a mix of those.
And I'm exactly on the same page. If it means that somebody who has never had a chance to present at a conference gets a spot because I don't speak, I'm totally for that. That's great.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
The nice thing is in the sense, again, when it comes to opportunities to being able to go to a conference, I should mention what Claire and I are doing, in the sense that we are actually, by doing this social media outreach, by doing these podcasts, by doing the tweet and live blogging that we will be doing at the conference, as well as recording podcast episodes at CAST, that is our contribution that we're doing that is allowing us to be able to go to CAST this year.
Yeah.
So if you don't end up as a featured content provider, there's the option to try to be on staff. So Michael and I were invited to be on social media staff. We've had this pattern anyway, so we're using our powers for good. But there are lots of volunteer opportunities at the conference. I don't know how many volunteers it actually takes to run CAST. That's a good question. But there are certainly people who have specialized. So some people tend to do registration or program selection or venue, boots on the ground kinds of things for the venue and location of the conference. But there are so many speakers who need help in their rooms. And I believe that there's someone who tends to stay with the room. Is that how it works?
Correct.
Yeah.
There is the facilitator especially for CAST, in the sense that CAST has the open season model where they actually manage and direct the flow of the conversations. So it's not just somebody standing there and introducing the speaker and saying, okay, do we have questions? It's a little more involved than that. But because of that, it's an active role. And if you are willing to be a facilitator for a given track or for a day, etc., that's definitely a large enough process that can oftentimes, it can get you a ticket to the conference, basically. There is somebody who actually leads the facilitators. Don't get me wrong, it's a gig. It really is. And there's a lot to it.
Oh, yeah. As you mentioned, we're caffeinating early in the morning to get in there.
Facilitation would be a great topic for a CASTcast podcast all by itself.
Ooh, let's put that in our backlog.
Yeah, definitely.
One way that I economized for getting to a conference was to stay with a friend or family, and actually made a new friend. There was a chat room where people were saying, hey, I'm going to this conference, I need a roommate. And that's how I met a new friend. She was headed there, and so was I, and we met on site. So that was an exciting experience. I recommend making sure you have, some sense of who this person is before you get there. But connecting with new people is what conferences are about. So if you're comfortable with meeting new people and staying with them, then that's one way to go.
A plane ride is something you can't really do that much economizing on, but as far as sharing a hotel room or doing something to help get the costs down for, if you can get an opportunity to do a volunteer gig, or if you are a speaker, or if you can get on staff or do something for the conference, they're all opportunities that should be explored. And if you are determined and if you are really enterprising, and it really does come down to the fact that if you are somebody who is saying, I want to help this conference be the best that it can be, and I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and do something to help make it the best that it can be, and if the conference committee can then say, hey, you've done enough, or you've shown us that you will do something of significant enough value for us, that absolutely we're willing to help you with this, they more than likely will. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst that can happen is they can say, we have too many people, or there's just not enough need for that, and the answer is no. And in that case, well, better luck next time. They might say yes next time.
Sure.
All right, so I think we've had some fun here, and I'm glad that we've had a chance to talk, and we want to encourage everybody to keep listening to future episodes of the CASTcast coming to a browser near you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys.